I arrive at my son's new home to reconcile when the neighbor grips my sleeve and whispers, "Don't drink anything. Run." I step inside anyway. 10 minutes later, I open the wrong cabinet and see a brown bottle marked with a skull. The label reads, "Potassium cyanide." My heart pounds, but my hand stays steady as I slide the door shut. A glass of wine waits for me on the table, its surface catching the chandelier light, beautiful and deadly. I don't argue with fate. I open my phone, type 911 silently, and pray the knock comes in time. Before we begin, please subscribe and tell us what time it is where you're watching. We love seeing this community. Hector's day begins the way he trusts it to begin, with the kettle sighing and the newspaper folded in perfect thirds beside a cooling mug. Phoenix light crosses a tidy kitchen, then glides over a garage workbench where clamps, rulers, and a carpenter's pencil sit in an exact line. Above the bench, a framed photo of Lucia in a summer dress catches the light. On the office shelf, Sun Mesa freight safety plaques stand by year like mile markers. A dog-eared index card leans against the monitor. Be generous, not naive. He straightens it with 2 fingers, a small ritual that feels like checking torque. He opens a small ledger with squared pages and his square handwriting. Dates and amounts run down the first column. Tuition top-up, $4,850. Apartment deposit, $1,600. First car cosign, $7,000 exposure. Paid off early. Bridge course, $2,200. Temporary business float, $12,500, not repaid. He doesn't need a ledger to remember, but writing keeps love from blurring into denial. Love, to him, is measured by what you carry without complaint, and also by when you set a load down. Before trucking, he was a civil engineer. When he built Sun Mesa from 2 trucks and a rotary phone, he kept one line he still tells new hires. If it can't hold weight, it doesn't go on the road. It's a joke and a rule. He applies it to axle ratings, to schedules, to promises. He tried to apply it to parenting, though that kind of load testing is never clean and never simulated. Julian once felt like clean steel. He built modest IT contracts, upgraded routers for dentists, set backups for small clinics, texted his dad cheerful screenshots when uptime ticked above 99. Then the language changed. Platforms, angel rounds, bridge notes. The hands that used to fix things began to pitch visions. Family Sundays thinned. A new watch appeared. The sedan became a German coupe. Calls ended with, "You wouldn't get it, Dad. The fracture has a date." 3 summers ago, Julian walked into Sun Mesa with a glossy deck and asked for $50,000. "It's the last check before we close, Dad. Friends and family. Everyone important is in." Hector slid the deck aside and asked for audited revenue, cash burn, the bank that sponsors the payments flow. The questions landed like wrenches. "You don't believe in me. I believe in work that holds." "Wait, mijo. Earn it." The door slammed so hard a photo of Lucia fell and cracked at the corner. The silence that followed had a new temperature. Quiet years learned their own rhythm. The ledger and the index card kept each other company. Hector negotiated tire prices, checked straps himself because trust, like webbing, frays from neglect. He rinsed 2 plates and dried 1. He kept the DeVille tuned and the plaques dusted. Sometimes he dialed Julian and hung up at the first ring, ashamed of how quickly pride and longing change places. The call arrives on a Monday while he's tightening a clamp on a cedar shelf for the office radio. The screen shows a Beverly Hills number. "Hello, Dad." Julian's voice is softer, careful. "I know it's been too long. I'm sorry." Hector sits without letting the clamp shift. "I'm listening." "Bianca has cooked your favorites," Julian says. "She wants to meet you again the right way. Come Friday. We want to make things right." The words move a stubborn bolt inside Hector's chest. He says, he will come. He pulls down the good overnight bag, the one he and Lucia used for anniversary trips to Bisbee and San Diego. From the safe, he lifts the Rolex he once promised himself would be Julian's on a future day. For Bianca, he chooses Lucia's pearl earrings wrapped in tissue, remembering the way Lucia tilted her head to fasten them, patient with the tiny clasp. He writes a card that simply says, "For the new chapter," and sets it with the gifts. Friday dawns clear over the valley. He backs the DeVille into the street and points her west. The Eagles ride low on the radio. At Quartzsite, a sun-bleached station sells him gas, and a clerk asks, "Visiting family?" "Family's the load you balance first," the man says. The advice rides with him over the Colorado. Arizona beige folds toward California green. Lanes thicken. Plates turn glossy. Traffic flows toward Los Angeles, and Hector feels proud and small at once. He pats the dashboard and tells the DeVille she still looks good among coupes and SUVs. The GPS voice drops him into neighborhoods where hedges are sculpted, sprinklers hiss, and trash cans look detailed by appointment. Palm Drive announces itself with shade and money. The house is a modernist white plane, with glass that mirrors the sky and a fountain that throws tiny rainbows. A circular drive curls like a signature. Cameras blink from the eaves with an expensive stare. Hector parks, kills the engine, lifts the gifts, and walks to the oak door with brass you can see your face in. He presses the bell and hears a chime designed by someone who designs chimes. No answer. He waits. He rings again, longer. Still no answer. Through the sidelight, he can make out a console table, a piece of art, a vase of orchids that might be real or might be better. He checks his watch. He's 10 minutes early. He walks the path along the side yard. The pool holds a perfect rectangle of blue. The canyon beyond, arranged like a brochure. Everything is staged and empty. Back at the front, he calls Julian. Voicemail on the 4th ring. Bianca's too. He sets the box on the step and sits beside it. The concrete breathes stored heat. An unmarked security car rolls by and slows. The driver's eyes take him in. Older, desert tan, faithful car. Hector lifts a hand. The car ghosts away. The fountain keeps throwing rainbows like a private joke between water and light. He tells himself it's traffic. He tells himself this zip code runs on different time. 5 minutes. 10. The camera's red dot watches him consider what forgiveness looks like. Then a whisper cuts the heat. Leave. The voice drifts from the hedge. A slim man steps out, wearing a lawn service polo, safety glasses pushed up like a headband. He checks the camera, then Hector. "Mr. Ramos?" "Yes, I'm Mr. Patel. 2 houses over. Please, leave. They are not what you think." "My son invited me," Hector says. "We had a fight. We're fixing it." Mr. Patel's hands tremble around a battery trimmer. "I know. I hear too much from this hedge." He glances down the street and lowers his voice. "Don't drink anything. Don't stay the night. Please." Hector studies him. Sweat salts the polo. Fear pinches the mouth. This is the kind of neighborhood where people do not speak to strangers. Fear turns neighbors into messengers. What happened? Patel shakes his head. "I am not gossip. I am warning. Do you know when they're back?" He hesitates, then whispers, "They watch the cameras. They know you're here. They are late on purpose." A warm breeze lifts a hint of chlorine and cut grass. Hector thinks about beams and paint and time. Bridges fail where hidden rust meets weight, he says under his breath. Patel tilts his head. "What?" "A reminder," Hector answers. "Thank you." Patel looks relieved to have delivered his message and vanishes through the side gate. Hector picks up the gifts and faces the door again. The camera's dot stares like a small, unblinking eye. "Be generous, not naive." The index card repeats in his head. He breathes in and out, squares his shoulders, presses the bell once more, and waits to meet whatever crosses the threshold of that beautiful, heavy door. Mr. Patel does not retreat far. He hovers by the hedge, eyes on the camera, and speaks fast. Bianca's father was wealthy. Pasadena old money. He came for dinner here last spring, cheerful, and left doubled over in the driveway, vomiting into the flower bed. 2 days later, he was dead. The police saw nothing, Mr. Patel says, but we saw enough. Hector wants to reject it. Pride insists his son could not be part of something ugly. Probability taps the ledger in his mind. He checks his watch. He could drive back to Phoenix and knock and step into a room where love and danger wear the same shoes. He makes a small decision with large edges. If he goes in, he will not drink, he will not eat, and his phone will stay in his pocket. A silver BMW drifts into the drive and settles behind the aging DeVille. Julian steps out in a silk shirt and practiced warmth. "Dad, you made it," he says, and pulls Hector in, the embrace familiar. "Traffic was murder," he jokes, then squeezes Hector's shoulder. Bianca emerges bright. "Hector, you must be roasting out here. Iced tea's waiting. Your favorite roast is resting." Inside, the air smells like lemon oil and money. The kitchen is white and steel, 2 blenders charging on a rail, knives set in a perfect line, 2 reds open. Hector notes cabinet positions the way he would map a load path. Under the sink, left tall pantry, right drawers, upper glass. "Tell me about the drive," Bianca says, humming a tune that once belonged to Lucia. Hector's throat is dry from the road. "May I get water?" he asks, and walks to the uppers that likely hide everyday glasses. Crystal glitters back. He opens the next, and the next. The hinge creak feels loud. He sets the empty glass down and crouches to the sink cabinet. Cleaning sprays, folded towels, then a brown pharmaceutical bottle wedged behind a roll of trash bags. He moves it to reach the towels, reads the label without meaning to, and the room narrows. Potassium cyanide. The skull sits cheerful and obscene, handled with extreme care. Emergency measures in case of exposure. Hector puts it back exactly, angles the towels to their corner, closes the door, turns the tap, and breathes through the sound of water. The glass fills, his hands steady. Routine covers shock like a sheet over fire. He returns to the living room and chooses a chair that frames the kitchen opening. Bianca glides to the reds, pours 3 even glasses, sets 2 by the window and 1 by the stove. Julian narrates house upgrades and the canyon breeze. Hector watches the long angles of motion. Bianca tilts her head as if remembering garnish, returns to the sink cabinet, and draws out the brown bottle behind her palm. The cap gives a tiny click. She tips 3 silent drops into the stove-side glass, swirls once and tucks the bottle back behind blue spray and folded towels. She places all 3 glasses on a tray, smile bright as host son. "Gentlemen," she says, and floats toward the dining room. Hector stands and keeps the stove-side glass fixed in memory, the way he holds a diagram. At the table, Bianca gestures him to the head. Julian sits to his right, Bianca to his left, choreography clean. The glass that lived by the stove now gleams at Hector's place. "Let us toast to family," Julian says, lifting his wine. "To new beginnings," Bianca adds. Hector lifts his water, apologetic smile easy. "I can't have alcohol with my blood pressure meds, doctor's orders. Started last month. Even a sip makes me dizzy." The lie fits the scene. Julian blinks, then nods. "Of course, Dad." Bianca's smile holds but tightens. A tiny muscle jumps at her jaw. Plan B moves in without a word. She stands, touches Hector's shoulder with friendly pressure, and returns to the blenders. The first hum begins, pauses, resumes, as if the recipe requires 2 stages. Hector watches the hall mirror catch a ghost of her hand, opening the sink cabinet again. The brown bottle flashes and disappears. Julian fills the space with chatter about wine regions and tile grout, checking his watch between sentences. Time sticks to everything. Bianca reappears with a glass pitcher of dark red and 3 highballs fogged with ice. She pours a generous serving in front of Hector. "For you, house specialty." You'll love it. Hector touches the glass as if admiring its chill. With dessert, he says kindly. If I drink now, I won't do justice to your roast. He nudges it to the right of his plate. Not refusal, not acceptance. Just a taste, Bianca says, light but edged. Took all afternoon. I'm old-fashioned, Hector says. I like courses. Silence gathers at the corners. A knife meets the table with a controlled thud. Julian's leg bounces. Bianca breathes in and out through her nose, smile unbroken and thinner. The trap mechanics hum under the charm like a motor behind a wall. Hector will not supply the swallow that turns a father into a headline. He angles his chair 1 inch, capturing the kitchen doorway, and beyond it, the cabinet where the skull waited behind spray bottles. He drinks water. He thanks them for the invitation, praises the house, praises the roast's aroma, and asks if he might wash up after the drive to be a better guest at their table. Down the hall, first door on the left, Bianca says. Take your time. Hector stands without hurry. He walks with his phone a weight in his pocket and his decision soldered to his calm. Mr. Patel's warning is no longer rumor. It has a bottle, a label, a count of drops, and a script. The performance continues behind him as he reaches the bathroom door. He reaches for the handle, and, for a beat, the house seems to listen. He exhales and dials help. Hector sits very still and lets the room keep moving around him. Candlelight warms the china, a breeze threads the drapes, and the roast sends up a ribbon of steam that would read as comfort to anyone who has not looked under the sink. He keeps his breathing even. The glass he will not touch glows like a prop under the chandelier. He fixes its position in his mind as a coordinate, not a drink. He notes Bianca's chair, the napkin ring she set to the left, the faint smudge her thumb left on the tray handle when she lifted it from the island. He measures the distance from his plate to the highball of juice she set near his knife. He tells himself to stay small and precise. A careful man walks out. An angry man makes mistakes. The ledger walks back to him as if it has been waiting by the doorway for its cue. Braces for a crooked smile, 1,940. Tuition shortfall, 7,800. Eviction rescue when the roommate vanished and the landlord changed the locks, 5,000. Interest forgiven without being asked. A starter laptop when internships fell through. Gas cards, in lean months, with a sticky note that read, "Because I am your father." He sees those entries as quiet anchors sunk into years of water. They were not about return. They were promises to a boy who once held a flashlight at the workbench and asked if bridges could live forever. Love, he thinks, is not theory. Love is paid in receipts and in showing up. Across the table, Bianca adjusts silverware without looking down. Every motion is small and exact, like a pianist finding a familiar key in the dark. She layers charm over intent, the way finish hides wood grain. Her smile never reaches her hands. He can hear the blender motor behind her cooling in soft clicks. He can see the cabinet door he closed a few minutes ago. The brown bottle tucked behind blue spray. Label turned outward for anyone who knows to read. The skull above the warning like a lantern at the edge of a quarry. He is surprised by how quickly the image settled inside him. Not shock now, only shape. A problem defined is a problem already moving toward its answer. I am not harsh. I am accurate, he tells the roaring in his blood. Accuracy keeps a bridge above water. Accuracy keeps a life from tilting off its bearings when someone you love turns the air thin. He lowers his gaze and builds a map he could draw blind. Stove side glass became the head setting when the tray crossed the room. Julian's glass sits to the right of center. Bianca's is to his left, stem aimed toward the window. The highball of juice rests 2 inches past the knife, closer to the candlestick than to his plate. He lets his fingers hover near it to fix the distance. He will not disturb a rim. He will not give anyone a reason to say the picture was smudged. His watch catches light. He reads the time and sets it in memory as if stamping wet concrete. 10 minutes since the blender stopped and the pitcher appeared. 12 minutes since Bianca lifted the tray. He counts back to the small click of the cap and the little shake that followed. The room had held its breath then. Chain of custody was not the language of his old work, yet it lives in him cleanly. Facts grow fragile when they are handled by hope. He will not handle them that way. He will hold them by their edges, and when it is time, he will hand them to people who wear gloves and write numbers in blue ink. Julian clears his throat and asks if the meat should be carved. Hector nods and says he would be honored. Words can pass across a table without carrying trust. While plates move, he keeps the map alive and lets memory annotate the margins. Sink cabinet, second shelf. Bottle behind a roll of heavy trash bags. Skull above the care language. He does not need the exact phrasing to know what it means. He knows the shape of danger when it sits in a kitchen like it pays rent. He takes a bite. Rosemary and salt and a life he has missed pass over his tongue, honest flavors in a dishonest room. He hears Lucia in the pause between swallow and breath. Do it my way, she would say. Quiet and correct. You do not break the table in half because one leg is rotten. You shore the good legs and you take photographs. You keep your voice steady. You choose the hallway where the truth gets signed. He answers her without moving his lips. I hear you. He feels the kind of calm he remembers from job sites when a storm moved in and crews needed a steady voice more than a speech. The calm means the work has begun. The calm means he will carry more weight than he thought an hour ago and still keep his footing. He makes a vow that feels like taking off a heavy coat and folding it on the back of his chair. Lucia, I will do this your way. I will not shout. I will not accuse. I will not let him push the word father like a shield. I will document and survive. I will walk out with my lungs and my name in one piece. Then I will call the people whose job is to measure and weigh and write down. The decision lands inside him with the clean taste of cold water after a long drive. A decision that simple makes space in the room. Bianca offers sauce and watches his mouth when he thanks her. He keeps his motions ordinary. His heartbeat is not ordinary, so he lends it numbers. He counts the polished swirls on the plate rim. He counts the beats between Julian's questions and Bianca's light encouragements. He counts the kitchen breaths when she vanishes and returns with cloth napkins that smell faintly of bleach. Her hands show no tremor. He does not look there for mercy. He looks there for method. Practice leaves fingerprints you can see if you stop pretending not to look. He lets the meal be a stage while he rehearses the rest of the night. Bathroom, low voice, address, spoken slow. Front door, heavy knock, and a badge. Dining room, careful photographs of glasses as they sit. Kitchen, doors opened by someone wearing gloves. He makes a place in the plan for Mr. Patel without saying his name. A neighbor who will stand behind a line and nod when asked what he heard and what he saw. If anyone asks Hector, he will be brief. I noted times. I did not drink. I did not touch the glass rim. I can show you where the bottle was. Julian lifts his own wine and drinks, as if the night requires performance from everyone. He smiles at his father over the rim, relief acting as love. Hector gives him back a small, steady look that says neither yes nor no. Bridges fail where hidden rust meets weight, he thinks. You do not hate the river for pulling. You replace beams you can, and you close the span until it is safe for the town. Family is not different from steel. If it carries a load it was never built to bear, it will fail loudly. Better to post signs and reroute traffic than to let people fall. The talk returns to safe things. Real estate prices, a trail in the canyon, Bianca's pastry technique. Hector lets it pass through him like weather and listens for the pressure drop that means a front is moving in. His decision not to confront spreads quiet into his muscles. There will be no raised voice, no accusation that becomes a dare. He keeps the choice in his pocket like a key, warm from the heat of his hand, ready for the right lock. He chews and swallows and breathes and keeps his phone hidden beneath the napkin within reach. He smiles when it is polite and nods when a nod is called for. His eyes visit the juice glass without settling, the way you glance at a mirror when you leave a room. He sets his fork down and lets his hands fold again. He feels older than he did this morning, and also more himself. The math of love is not only the dollars in the notebook, it is also this refusal to let a bad turn erase years of care. It is the patience to step around rage and aim for proof. It is the discipline to choose survival over spectacle. When the plates are cleared, he thanks Bianca for a meal he will remember for reasons no one at the table will say aloud. He asks where the restroom is, and rises with the posture of a man who has eaten enough. Down the hall, he touches the banister only where the wood curls and not where the varnish shines. He does not want his fingerprints to wander and confuse the night. In the mirror, he sees a man who can carry a ledger and a truth at the same time. He breathes once, twice, and decides again. He will not confront. He will document. He will survive. He turns toward the door with a steady hand and a clear plan. Hector eased the bathroom door shut until the latch clicked. He turned the lock carefully, the sound sharp in the quiet tile space. His phone was already in his palm. He slid the volume to its lowest setting, checked that the signal held strong, and pressed 3 digits. The line clicked open, and a calm voice answered. He bent his head close and whispered his name, the street, the white modernist villa with cameras blinking at every corner. He gave the dispatcher the words that mattered most. Potassium cyanide, brown bottle under the sink, 3 drops in a wine glass. He said he had seen it with his own eyes. 2 suspects, Julian and Bianca. No weapons he could see, only the poison. The dispatcher's voice stayed steady. Stay calm. Officers en route. Do not consume anything. Keep them calm. He whispered that he understood. He ended the call, flushed the toilet for cover, ran the tap, and let water splash against porcelain. In the mirror, his reflection looked older, but not weak. Shoulders square, he smoothed his shirt, wiped his forehead, and breathed once, twice. He unlocked the door and walked back toward the dining room as if nothing had shifted. Julian looked up with a broad smile, eager to resume his role as host. Bianca hovered with the tray of glasses. Hector sat, lifted his napkin, and smiled easily. "Not tonight," he said when Julian urged him to take a sip. Blood pressure medicine doesn't mix well with alcohol. Bianca offered juice with too bright enthusiasm. He chuckled gently, patted his stomach, and said maybe after dessert. He steered the talk to real estate values, trucking permits, and highway tolls. Familiar ground that let him speak with ease and buy minutes without raising suspicion. He asked about renovation costs, about zoning, about city politics, and nodded at their vague answers. He felt the clock in his chest, not on his wrist. 20 minutes became 12, then 8. Each answer, each polite refusal, each calm diversion moved him closer to the heavy knock he knew was coming. He let the conversation roll, kept his pulse hidden behind steady words, and waited for the sound of justice on the door. Hector kept the conversation moving like a gentle current, never letting it settle where pressure could build. Bianca eased the tall glass of dark juice toward his plate, ice ticking the rim like a metronome. Julian pitched the weekend again, a canyon view room, a terrace brunch, a coastal drive if traffic was kind. Hector nodded and asked about contractor start times, sprinkler inspections, and parking rules, the friendly trivia of a careful neighbor. He shifted to freight yard stories, a blown tire at mile marker 80, a rookie who learned to check torque before dawn. Bianca slid the glass another inch when she reset a knife. He let it sit close but untouched, a test weight over a span not yet open. The wines waited on a tray. Rosemary rode the air over something sweeter he did not name. Sirens threaded the distance, not loud, just a disciplined line that lifted hairs on his arm. He bridged the minute by asking for a photo to show friends the chandelier and the view. Bianca adjusted a napkin with a hostess reflex. Julian smoothed his shirt. Hector framed a wide shot that captured the table, the 3 untouched glasses, the seating positions, and the wall clock. He took one more of the tray, then set the phone face down, calm hand, steady breath. The doorbell chimed, clear and expensive. The knock followed, firm and professional, placed at the center of the wood. "Police," called a steady voice. Hector set his napkin beside his plate and stood. Julian rose faster, an edge showing beneath the practiced warmth. Bianca's hands paused over the carving knife. "I am Hector Morales," he said evenly. "I called." The words landed in the foyer with the weight of steel. 2 uniformed officers entered with measured caution, followed by a plainclothes detective whose eyes moved like a surveyor's level. The lead officer asked who was present. Hector repeated his name, identified Julian as his son and Bianca as Julian's wife, and said he had reason to believe a poisoning attempt was underway. He pointed, not dramatically but precisely, to the tray of wine and to the tall glass of juice within reach of his chair. He added that a small brown bottle, labeled potassium cyanide, sat beneath the kitchen sink behind cleaning supplies. "Hands where we can see them, please," the detective said. Bianca folded her fingers together. Julian's jaw flexed once, then stilled. The officers divided the scene with quiet efficiency. One photographed the table from wide to close, then each glass, ruler, and clock in frame. Another bagged the stemware one by one, new gloves for each, paper evidence bags labeled with position and time. A third went to the kitchen, photographed the cabinet, then used tongs to lift a bottle from behind a sponge. "Potassium cyanide," the kitchen officer read. Bianca's eyes flicked to Julian and back. "It must be mislabeled," Julian said, palms up. "A prank, or something left by a previous owner." Detective Rowan did not move his pen. "Who manages the kitchen?" he asked. "I do," Bianca said. "Who has access to that cabinet?" "We both do." A field kit touched the rim of the wine glass nearest Hector's plate, then the lip of the juice glass. Color shifted in a way that needed no translation. "Preliminary indication present," the officer said, careful and calm. "Full analysis at the lab." Hector felt relief climb his spine and settle between his shoulders. He kept it off his face. Lucia's old line to a much younger Julian crossed his mind. "Truth has a sound you cannot fake." Rowan asked Hector to step to the foyer while officers finished. Hector described the neighbor's warning, his arrival, the unanswered door, the silver car in the drive, Bianca's greeting, the kitchen talk, the wine placement, his refusal, the bathroom call, and the doorbell. He tied each moment to the wall clock and to photos on his phone. He did not theorize or assign motives. He stuck to locations, actions, and words. In the dining room, bags sealed with a crisp tear, forms slid behind clear sleeves on a hard case that clicked shut. When the last swab dried, the lead officer asked Julian to step outside. Bianca would follow in a separate unit. Rights were read with practiced cadence. Outside, a second car idled. The cul-de-sac gathered at its edges with phones held chest-high, curiosity restrained by cost and etiquette. Mr. Patel stood near his hedge, hands folded, face steady. Hector gave a small nod. Sprinklers clicked on along a lawn, and the night smelled of water and hot stone. Rowan handed Hector a card with his name and a case number and asked if he could be available in the morning. He could. A detective would call before noon. "Thank you for clarity," Rowan said. Hector answered that facts made their own wind when you let them. The house felt enormous after the cruisers rolled away. The fountain kept its patient music as Hector walked to his car. He drove to a modest motel under palms. The elevator took its time, a quiet box that let him breathe. In the room, he sat on the bed and listened to the air conditioner cycle. He texted Mr. Patel a thank you. The reply arrived quickly. "I was afraid you would not come," it read. He slept in pieces and woke before sun. A new number rang at 7. Assistant District Attorney Torres introduced herself, voice steady and crisp. She asked for a morning interview. He agreed. The preliminary test aligned with his report and the label, and the lab would rush analysis. "Bring yourself and any notes," she said. He opened his laptop and typed a memo the way he wrote load reports. Times on the left, events on the right. Arrival, unanswered rings. Neighbor warning. Car arrival. Greeting. Wine placed. Cabinet opened. Bottle observed. Drops added. Refusal. Juice prepared. Bathroom call. Doorbell. Officers. Field test. Evidence sealed. Detention. Mr. Patel met him outside the district attorney's building with a garden notebook under his arm. He had already spoken to an investigator and wanted Hector to know he had written dates and times when the house felt wrong this past year. He showed an entry about Bianca's father leaving pale and sick, an ambulance that never came, a funeral that arrived too quickly. They rode the elevator together without much talk. Shared air felt like solidarity. The interview room was bright and plain. ADA Torres sat with a recorder and a legal pad. Detective Rowan entered with a folder that looked heavier than paper. Torres swore Hector in and asked him to recount everything from arrival to departure. He kept to what he had seen, heard, and done. He did not wander into motive. He used names, positions, and times. Torres's pen moved the whole time. She asked about the photos. He provided them and explained the angles. She asked whether he had consumed anything. He had not. She asked whether anyone pressured him. He described the gentle insistence and the phrase "just a sip." After lunch, the lab called. Torres put the call on speaker. The analyst confirmed cyanide in the wine glass near Hector's plate and in the pitcher of juice. Concentrations were high. The bottle contained the same compound at a purity consistent with commercial sourcing. Partial prints appeared on the stems. Julian's matched one. Bianca's were predominant on the bottle. The report would be filed before evening. Hector stepped into the afternoon and called his dispatcher in Phoenix to say he would be back by the weekend. He told Mr. Patel he would buy tea once schedules allowed. He did not call Julian. There was nothing to negotiate that facts would not settle. He bought a sandwich, ate half on a bench, and saved the rest. Patience keeps bridges standing, he told himself. That evening, he drove past the house once. The driveway was empty. The fountain cast its own light. Bougainvillea scented the street. He parked and sat long enough to decide not to go to the door. He had done his part. He had kept his body unpoisoned and his voice precise. He put the car in gear and returned to the motel. Sleep held longer. Morning found him standing straighter. Torres called before breakfast. "Grand jury next week?" she said, and thanked him for the memo's detail. Mr. Patel's affidavit matched the pattern. A judge had signed a warrant. Rowan would be in touch. Hector said he would be there early. He opened his bag. The Rolex remained wrapped in tissue. Lucia's pearl earrings rested in a velvet box. He left them there. In the mirror, he practiced one sentence he used to tell new hires. Bridges fail where hidden rust meets weight. He slipped Rowan's card and Torres's card into his wallet and folded the memo. Outside, the freeway moved in lines of light. If it cannot hold weight, it does not go on the road, he thought, and drove to the office with both hands on the wheel. By noon, he sat in a waiting area, while a forensic photographer walked by with a case that clicked with each step. A clerk passed with stamped forms. The machine moved piece by piece with the confidence of a structure designed with redundancies. Hector wrote the day's date, the time of each call, and every name. He underlined the phrase that steadied him. Document first, decide second. He breathed, and the room finally felt level under his feet again. The arraignment unfolded without spectacle. Hector sat behind the rail, hands folded, watching the small movements that mattered. The deputy clipped cuffs from Julian's wrists to reattach them after the hearing, steel on steel making a brief, precise note. Bianca stood a half step behind her lawyer, face blank, eyes fixed somewhere middle distance, as if choosing not to see the seal of the court above the bench. Julian scanned the gallery as though a secret door might open if he stared hard enough. No door opened. The clerk read counts in a voice trained to be both clear and forgettable. When the judge asked for pleas, the answers came as if recited from a rehearsal. Not guilty, not guilty. The gavel fell light, a signal rather than a strike, and the calendar moved forward. The grand jury met in a paneled room that smelled faintly of old paper and new toner. Ada Torres stood with a binder whose tabs matched the structure of her voice. She began with motive. Money first, then escape from debts, then the leverage of family ties. She placed photos of Hector's home ledger on an easel, not to inflame, but to clarify a pattern of giving that a predatory mind might treat as a reservoir. She tracked the earlier death of Bianca's father, a healthy 70-year-old whose collapse followed a dinner at the same address. She dated the probate filing, the transfer, the remodel, the cars. She did not raise her tone. She let sequence do the work. Mr. Patel sat upright at the witness table, hands folded over a small notebook. He spoke the line that would anchor the morning. "I told him to run," he said, "because the last time I watched a father walk in here, I watched an ambulance drive away 2 days later." He described vomiting in a driveway, a smell like bitter almonds, a funeral homespun and fast, a silence afterward that felt purchased. He did not claim to know chemistry or law. He described what he had seen, the dates he had recorded, the sound of sirens fading down a street that had learned to whisper. They played the 911 audio. Hector's whisper filled the room with careful breath. "My name is Hector Morales. I believe my son and his wife are trying to poison me." He gave the address, the bottle location, the positions of glasses, the words he had heard, the warning he had received. The whisper did not shake. It contained the grammar of building codes and shipping manifests. A woman on the panel closed her eyes while she listened. When the recording ended, silence held for a count. Then Torres called the next witness. The chemist explained cyanide in terms the panel could hold. "A salt," she said, "that kills cellular respiration. It robs your blood of its ability to carry oxygen, so your heart and brain and muscles suffocate while your lungs keep drawing air." She pointed to photos that showed the label Hector had seen, skull and crossbones printed by a manufacturer who did not pretend. She walked through chain of custody like a person counting rungs on a ladder. Photograph, bag, seal, signature, log, cold storage, analysis, peer review. She did not dramatize. She measured. True bills returned after 40 minutes. Trial seated in a room with brighter light and stricter clocks. The prosecution began by promising order, not spectacle. Ada Torres traced a line from invitation to attempted ingestion, a route engineered like a trap on rails. "Attempted patricide by poison," she said, then set the phrase aside and showed the parts. The pre-poured wine, the prepared alternative, the choreography that accounted for refusal. Option A was Cabernet. Option B was juice blended for health and habit. Both were loaded. She showed the cabinet beneath the sink, the bottle behind cleaning supplies, the stemware placed in a triangle that matched the photo Hector had taken when time still felt elastic. The defense answered with words Hector had expected. household chemical confusion, elderly confusion, misinterpretation of domestic shortcuts, and the absence of intent. They suggested the bottle might hold a safer compound mislabeled, that the dropper might have belonged to a forgotten kit, that Bianca had been treating a pest problem in a careless way, that Hector's age and stress might have colored his perceptions. They pointed to the absence of a consumed dose and called it proof of ambiguity. Torres returned with photos whose corners were square and cruel. She projected the shot Hector took of the table, the tray, the clock, the seating. She offered the lab's high-resolution images of fingerprints raised by powder and lit by raking light. She offered bank records with dates that marched in lockstep with the post-inheritance remodel, the cars, the transfers. She called a neighbor from Pasadena who remembered the suddenness of a death, the smell in a kitchen, the bloodless wealth that followed. Julian took the stand in his own defense. His lawyer asked about childhood, about a Cadillac, about a father who built bridges and a son who wanted to build platforms. Julian's eyes shone as he described his first laptop and the code he wrote at 12. Then Torres approached with a thin folder. She laid down printed messages recovered from a phone backup. The courtroom held its air while she read. "Tonight settles it." Julian had typed at 4:32. "He'll stay if dessert hits right, at 6:10. Another read, "Make sure he relaxes." The lines landed without commentary. Torres asked whether Julian had written them. He said he did not recall. She asked again. He said, yes. Hector testified briefly. He told the story the same way he had told the dispatcher and the grand jury. He did not add adjectives. He did not perform anger. He described the ledger in his office only to explain why he had driven 6 hours with gifts wrapped in careful paper. He said he loved his son, and that love did not cancel gravity. He said he had learned to weigh spans, and that numbers did not bend for hope. He did not turn his head to look at the defense table. A forensic economist walked through the inheritance timeline from Bianca's father to this house, to this dinner, to this moment. A detective from Pasadena summarized the reopened case that now reached a line of charges on Bianca's docket. A pathologist described the signs of cyanide death. The word seizures did not need an adjective, neither did the phrase bitter almonds. The defense closed by asking the jury to find complexity in the kitchen and charity in the heart. People drink wine, they said. People blend juice. Labels exaggerate. Fear disguises itself as certainty. They suggested a misunderstanding amplified by estrangement. They asked the jury to imagine Hector misreading a symbol in a cabinet he did not know. Ada Torres closed without a raised voice. She returned to the first principle that had guided her file. The plan accounted for refusal. She showed the wine glass again, then the pitcher, then the bottle beneath the sink. She showed Julian's messages and Bianca's prints. She spoke about family as trust and trust as leverage when corrupted. He built a bridge for his son, she said. They tried to throw him off it for money. Not with a shove in daylight, but with drops in a glass. The kind of violence that assumes silence. She asked the jury to lift the weight of facts and feel where they settled. Deliberations took 6 hours over 2 days. The jury returned with faces that said the work had been done and done again. The foreperson stood. On the charge of attempted murder, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder by poisoning, guilty. On the reopened count of murder in the death of her father, Bianca Vale, guilty. The clerk recorded each answer. A chair creaked in the second row and stopped. Sentencing waited a month while reports gathered and victims spoke. The courtroom felt colder on that day, though the same sun sat behind the same windows. A sister of Bianca's father read a statement that did not use metaphors. She described a strong man who played golf and ate soup and called on Sundays. She described a phone that stopped ringing. Mr. Patel spoke a short paragraph about hedges and fear and the way a street can learn to hold its breath. Hector declined to speak from the lectern. He had written his words already, in the memo he gave the detective and in the quiet he chose at the table. The judge took her time. She spoke of family as public trust in miniature and of betrayal as a poison that spreads beyond a single table. She acknowledged the defense request for mercy and placed it next to a set of facts that robbed the word of weight. For Julian, she imposed a term measured in decades, with eligibility for parole so distant it felt theoretical. For Bianca, she imposed a term that recognized two harms: the father she had and the father she attempted to take. She ordered restitution to Hector for documented mitigation costs and to the estate of Bianca's father, along with an apology to be published in a newspaper of record. She ordered asset clawbacks where law allowed. Marshals stepped forward as the judge finished, a choreography as respectful as it was final. Bianca's face did not change. Julian's shoulders slumped as if a span had failed under a weight he had miscalculated. The cuffs clicked once and twice. The gavel touched wood softer than the first day, as if the system itself understood that loudness was unnecessary now. Hector stood with his palms on the back of the bench in front of him. The stamped pages on the counsel table looked heavier than paper. The room emptied with the hush of a library at closing. ADA Torres shook his hand and said that precision had done more than courage ever could in this case. Detective Rowan nodded once and left to write reports that would outlast the afternoon. Mr. Patel waited in the hallway with a small tin of sweets from his kitchen. The two men shared one each without speaking. The sugar steadied the air. Outside, the day was ordinary in a way that felt earned. A courier crossed the plaza with a stack of filings. A toddler protested a stroller and then relented. Hector walked to the curb and looked both ways before he stepped into the crosswalk. At the far side, he paused and checked his watch. He had a call to make to his office, then a visit to a small shop that engraved brass plates. He turned toward the parking garage and let the door close behind him. The echo sounded like a period. Weeks later, when reporters moved on and filings settled into the record, he received envelopes that contained numbers, orders, schedules. He filed each without drama. A restitution check would cover what he had spent to secure his credit and replace his devices. A separate notice documented the start of asset proceedings. He made copies, labeled them, and placed them beside Lucia's pearls, still in their box. One afternoon, he drove past the house where the fountain ran. A for sale sign stood on the lawn, broker name, glossy, price withheld. He parked for a moment at the curb and rolled down his window. The air smelled like cut grass and chlorine. He thought about bridges, about rust hidden under paint, about how weight reveals what paint hides. He started the engine and drove home through streets that did not know his name. The record would stand whether he visited it or not. He had chosen venues where truth had ballast. He had spoken in rooms built for hearing. He had handed over facts, circled items on a page, and stepped back. The camera that mattered was the one over the judge's seal, the notary stamp, the time on the wall clock, the color change in a field test. In those frames, the story did not need a narrator. It needed a chain of custody and a signature. The law wrote the rest. Hector walked out into sunlight, steady, documented, free, and ready to rebuild. Justice had spoken. Love remained, disciplined by boundaries, verified by facts, anchored by time. Hector began with the boring work that keeps danger small. A security consultant met him at the kitchen table in the Tempe Casita, opened a neat folder, and mapped steps that felt like control returning. They froze his credit with all 3 bureaus and added fraud alerts so any new attempt to borrow would ring his phone. They replaced his phone and laptop, restoring only photos and contacts, not a single app that had not earned its way back. Estate pages came next. Hector met his attorney in a sunlit conference room and amended the will and trust with language that drew hard lines and shorter lists. Durable power of attorney moved to his cousin Alma in Yuma, The person who had always shown up without an invoice. Medical directives were refreshed. The attorney added a note about how the office would handle reporters and uninvited calls. Copies were notarized, embossed, and filed like parts placed in a bridge that would have to carry weight. The casita earned eyes. Cameras went up under the eaves and over the door, the base station tucked into a hall closet. A soft chime sounded at a person's approach. The first alert caught a raccoon at the trash bin, and Hector laughed for the first time in weeks. Seen early, threats look small. He mounted a small brass plate above his desk. Document first, decide second. The words were both rule and promise. Under the plaque, he kept a stitched notebook and began dating entries again, noting calls and choices. Lucia's photo sat within view, warm in morning light. He wrote to Mr. Patel. "Thank you for your warning by the hedge," he said. "A person can save a life with one brave sentence." He slipped in a prepaid landscaping card. "Be the good soil and the strong shears. You saved my life," he wrote in the last line. He sealed the envelope and walked it to the post office because thanks need footsteps. Work needed dignity too. Hector gathered supervisors in the Sun Mesa Freight break room, a room with burned coffee and honest chairs he loved. He explained he was ready to step back and wanted the company to stay in hands that knew its roads. He offered structured terms to Elena, his dispatcher of 15. Years, a fair price, a down payment she could handle, payments tied to cash flow, and a clause that protected wages. She cried, then nodded and shook his hand like a partner. On his last morning at the yard, he walked the line of tractors and trailers and stopped at the faded red rig that started it all. He set his palm on the hood, like thanking an old friend. He remembered Lucia bringing tortas to the lot and resting her cheek against the window. He whispered, "Thank you," into the metal and left the keys on Elena's desk. The lakeside casita in Tempe asked very little and gave much back. Morning light slid across a small kitchen and a table that sat two. Hector planted rosemary by the wall, set a young lemon in a half barrel, and scattered wildflower seed along a narrow strip of soil. He lined the bed with river stones. A rescue dog named Mateo arrived from a shelter with cautious eyes and a quick tail, then learned the house and decided not to leave him. Neighbors waved on morning loops around the water. 2 retirees walked before sunrise to beat the heat, and a night shift nurse used the lake to rinse away hospital hours. No one asked about the past. He was simply Hector, the man with the quiet dog and the good hat. He brought a spare trash grabber to an older couple, and they patrolled the shoreline each week. Usefulness returned. He posted one note to friends, resolved through proper channels. "Thank you for the meals and calls. I am well." He turned off comments and watered the lemon tree. Afternoons were for reading and mending attention. He chose memoirs by builders and quiet novels where apologies arrived without speeches. Sometimes he set the book down and held Lucia's photo until the ache softened to gratitude. He told her he had kept her way, quiet and correct and complete. He pointed to the brass plate and said the rule worked. On Thursdays, he stopped by the yard to drink coffee with Elena and talk routes and hiring. He praised more than he corrected and left after an hour so she could lead without a shadow. Pay went out on time. Breakdowns were handled. The company did not need him, which felt like success. Money moved in slower lines now. Restitution arrived in scheduled installments. He paid the consultant and attorney and endowed a small scholarship for students studying logistics ethics. The rest he let sit. Speed had done enough damage. When the evenings cooled, he clipped Mateo's leash and walked until the sky turned the apricot shade Lucia had loved. At a west bench, he watched a heron hold still and a boy skip stones. No one asked the wrong questions. He answered only what mattered, like which path the dog preferred. The Rolex stayed in its box on a high shelf. He neither sold it nor gifted it. It lived as a reminder of a path he had not taken. The pearl earrings he had carried to Beverly Hills rested beside it, wrapped in tissue. Some things can stop and become story. Each month he mailed cards, one to Mr. Patel with a garden report and a lemon photo, one to Alma, with thanks for holding legal duty lightly, one to Ada Torres with the simple line, "Your precision mattered." Replies came in time, a note about bougainvillea, a check mark, a sentence on letterhead. Together they made a rhythm a person could live by. Hector kept a small stack of note cards near the notebook and wrote principles as they proved true. Love without boundaries turns into debt. Kindness is a bridge. Documentation is the steel. If an invitation arrives, ask what it must carry. He checked promises the way he once checked load ratings. A Sunday brought sawdust. He set a folding table in the driveway and sanded cedar until the grain rose like water. Mateo slept in shade. Hector stenciled welcome, mounted it beside the door, and felt the word, "do good work." 2 kids came to pet the dog and stayed to talk about school. He taught them how to coil a hose and check a bicycle chain. Skill is a kind of kindness that stays. Days did not erase what happened. Life grew around it like a deck around a hard tree. When the old fear woke him, after a dream of a cabinet and a skull, he went to the desk, wrote a few lines, and watched ink push the dark back. The notebook thickened and his shoulders loosened. On the first cool evening of fall, he brewed tea the way Lucia taught him and set her photo where the light warmed the glass. He told her the lemon had taken, the wildflowers had surprised him, and the company had stayed steady. He said Mateo waited at every curb without being asked. He said thank you for her years and for the compass she left. He used words that fit. He did not forgive what had not sought it. He chose acceptance, a word that means the facts live here. Choices were made. Justice took its shape. His work became small engineering, a house that locks, a garden for bees, a schedule with room for neighbors, and boundaries that let kindness stand without owing. Night routines settled him. He checked locks and cameras, set the phone down, glanced at the brass plate, and breathed until the bed felt level. Sleep came earlier and stayed longer. The lake learned his footsteps, and so did the people who shared its path. He was Hector again, only Hector, the man with a steady dog and a habit of writing before acting. Peace had not been given. He built it, one documented choice at a time. In the morning, he brewed coffee, opened his notebook, and wrote one line to begin the day with steadiness and truth. If this story has resonated with you, I invite you to stay with us a little longer. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who may need the reminder that kindness is not weakness and that real generosity requires a backbone. We all come to moments where trust is tested and where protecting our peace means drawing a boundary, even when it hurts. Tell us in the comments, have you ever faced that moment yourself? Did you have to step back, set limits, or walk away to preserve your own dignity and safety? What happened, and what did you learn? Your stories not only strengthen this community, but remind others that they are not alone in choosing integrity over illusion. And if you are wondering what comes next, stay tuned. In our next episode, a neighbor quietly moves a fence line 5 feet into the yard. What looks like a small act of entitlement quickly grows into a full dispute until survey pins and a drone reveal the undeniable truth. It is a story about property, respect, and how small thefts can signal something much larger. So make sure you subscribe for new stories every week, and remember to comment with your own experience. On screen, you will see reminders, subscribe, new stories, weekly, and comment your story. Thank you for watching, for sharing, and for helping to build a place where truth, boundaries, and resilience are not just words, but practices that carry weight.